For 17 weeks, everybody that plays fantasy football with Yahoo gets a recap of how they're doing with their fantasy team. This is a story that's relevant to one person on the planet. It's your story.
When you look at any operations, you're always looking at the data to understand what happened. So we're kind of going in and helping them understand it's not always that you have to wait for after the fact. There is an ability for you to control your production line, control this process, control your assets, control how much energy you're utilizing.
Welcome to the Inside Forbes Councils podcast. Each episode shares transformative insights and advice from members of Forbes Councils, a group of invitation-only communities for successful executives and entrepreneurs. This is Inside Forbes Councils.
Happy New Year and welcome to episode 17 of the Inside Forbes Councils podcast. 2019 is sure to be another record-breaking year in terms of the amount of data we generate. But what good is all this data if we can't make sense of it? Today, two Forbes Councils members will share the work that their companies are doing to use all the data that we create. We'll hear from Marc Zionts of Automated Insights and Humera Malik of Canvas Analytics. Yes, we have data visualization tools and dashboards are all the rage, but Marc Zionts of Automated Insights argues that storytelling is the most effective way to convey the information that data holds for us.
My name is Marc Zionts, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Automated Insights. Automated Insights is a leader in the area of natural language generation, or NLG.
NLG stands for Natural Language Generation, but the buzzword we heard a lot in 2018 was natural language processing.
So natural language processing is a area that lots of people have heard of. Essentially what you're doing is you are taking unstructured things, if you will, and trying to create structured data out of them. Some examples of that would be, let's say you want to scan documents or look at Word documents, or you want to scrape the internet and you're trying to extract out numbers, data, trend, information that you can then put into a structured database. Or you could actually be listening in on phone calls and trying to extract out user sentiment. All of these are examples of natural language processing where you're trying to take that language and then you're trying to extract out data, which can then be used for making business decisions or creating various use cases. Natural language generation is essentially the exact opposite. We take structured data in, and with structured data, we can create a story, a report, or a narrative in software that sounds like it was written by a person. So you can almost think about this as NLP as text to data, and you can kind of think of NLG as being data to text.
Taking data and writing reports from it sounds like something we could do quite easily with an outsourced team or with interns. So why NLG?
So the business case around NLG varies depending on the particular use case. If we take the Associated Press, it's quite simple. They, like other media publications, have a requirement in their business to produce more and more content at lower costs, often with greater frequency, often more in a more granular manner. There's really no other way to do it except to introduce automation here. I mean, if you're the AP Newswire, you've got so many human resources you can deploy. And if you can automate the creation of certain sets of stories through technology, it's much lower cost than people. And then your people are freed up to do investigative reporting, qualitative reporting. But the quantitative reporting can be left to us. For them, it gets down to the economics of how do we produce what we need to even create more content in this pressure cooker that media has become, and have an economically viable business. And without introducing automation, they'd be hard pressed to find a way to do that. Quarterly, the AP writes a story on every public company's quarterly earnings. They used to do this manually, and when they did this, they covered about 300 public companies. Today, they cover every public company in the US, which is about 4,000 companies. And they do this through our software, not with people. Now, the way the story gets generated is that we get a feed of data about the earnings on each company. And from that data, we generate the story. they have contracted with another company to provide the data stream to us. In the case of AP, they contracted with Zacks Information Services. So Zacks prepares the data. We then take the data that describes the company's earnings. What were their revenues? What were their profits? What was their EPS? How did it compare to last quarter? How did it compare to the same time the prior year? How did this meet the expectation of the analysts with consensus? And with all that data, we then automatically generate the story in software that sounds like it was written by a AP business writer, and it's created in the style of the AP Newswire service. We do all the minor league baseball stories for the Associated Press too. And from those stats, just from those data stats that are fed from Major League Baseball and minor league baseball to our API, you need to tell a story. We do a lot of mass personalization in which there's just simply no other way to do this without automation. And let me give you an example of that. So this one's fun, and many people see us here, is that we're the people that power Yahoo Fantasy Football recaps. So during the football season, for 17 weeks, everybody that plays fantasy football with Yahoo gets a recap of how they're doing with their fantasy team. This is a story that's relevant to one person on the planet. It's your story. And it's, by the way, it's your team and how you're doing. And it's all designed to be pretty snarky and kind of encourage you to go back and spend more time on their platform and do better next week. Of course, this is important to them because they make money with ad revenue monetization. Now, if you think about it, through a whole football season, we create over 100 million individualized stories. The notion that you could do this in any other way just isn't even imaginable. Every one of these is a personalized story based on their data for that week, and it connects to the user, and it creates more engagement with the product fantasy football. So that's content at scale, if you will, mass personalization.
So I've definitely read your company's blurbs on Yahoo for the past 15 weeks or whatever it's been.
Cool. How are you doing this season? And are we being nice to you?
No, I'm terrible at fantasy, but I keep getting roped into a league with some of my college friends, and it's a good way for them to take my money, I guess. I don't know.
We're glad to do our part. So.
So you mentioned in the Yahoo example, and I've experienced this personally, the snarky language that critiques your performance every week. What elements go into determining that language or that voice? How do you train Yahoo to be snarky?
Yeah, so the scientific response is we have our systems are use kind of a combination of some machine learning AI techniques, but it typically starts and finishes with elections that our customers make that are deterministic. And the reason for this is that it has to reflect the brand properly, especially when it's customer facing. I mean, Yahoo has a certain tone that they like or don't like, certain words they're comfortable with. But that tone and style, of course, is totally different than an AP earnings report. We train our customers how to use our software. We've got a great user interface for them. And through that UI, they are able to kind of create their narrative and then use the tools to then convert that into an automated process once they've done that.
So let's take a step back here. Why stories? Because we have data visualization tools and we have Tableau and everybody's looking to create dashboards. What are these tools missing?
The argument here is that about a third of the people understand the data. Other people, what they do is that they see a dashboard and they say, oh, that's really interesting. I have one question. What does that mean? And so what they might do is pick up the phone and call a business analyst. This is an expensive and scarce resource. And now they're talking to them and having them step them through a dashboard. At some point, the analyst gets a little fed up with this. And what they do is they'll screenshot or export a static view of a dashboard and write up some bullets by hand saying what it means and send it around. Well, that kind of defeats the point of having live interactive data. People will think they know what the data means, but they actually don't. And then they make a business decision based on their misunderstanding of the data. And that could cost the corporation a lot of money. You could make a $1 million mistake because you misread the data. Or people go into a meeting. It's a 1-hour meeting. They spend the first 50 minutes of the meeting arguing about what the data means. And then the last 10 minutes of the meeting, they have a rush discussion about what are we going to do about this? Wouldn't it be better to have a narrative explanation with your dashboard so everybody comes in on the same page with the same understanding? And now you're talking about, why is this happening? What are we doing about it? What's our strategy? And so that really yields productivity enhancements. In all cases, though, when we work with our customers, we find very strong ROIs. Because like any business software company, and if you don't, unless you have some visionary strategist that says, I don't care what it costs, it's cool, you're not going to make a sale. So we do find the economics, they typically are compelling with a very rapid ROI.
Marc, how can people find out more about you and Automated Insights?
Great. If you are interested in learning more about Automated Insights, please come to our website at automatedinsights.com. Follow us on Twitter, #AutomatedInsights. Look at us on LinkedIn. We're very active in trying to communicate articles, blogs, information that we hope are helpful to people that are trying to learn more about this technology and how it can benefit their nonprofit, their government organization, their enterprise, commercial enterprise business. And we really appreciate the questions and the interest today.
All right, great. I'm hoping that one day Marc's software can write the voiceover scripts for this show. That would help me a lot. Let's take a quick break.
Are you a successful executive or entrepreneur with insights to share? Learn more about our invitation-only communities at ForbesCouncils.com. Forbes Councils members have the opportunity to collaborate with fellow business leaders to overcome challenges and create new opportunities. Members also have access to support benefits that help them save time and money, and a platform, Community Voice, on Forbes.com, through which they can amplify their voices and exchange ideas. See if you qualify at ForbesCouncils.com.
Marc, Zionts, and Automated Insights is helping people take the data they have and use it to tell a story, far beyond what a dashboard can do, and to help people find takeaways in the data. But sometimes it's just more efficient to take people out of the process. Humera Malik is CEO and co-founder of Canvas Analytics.
My name is Humera Malik. I am CEO and co-founder of Canvas Analytics. We are an industrial analytics company. So we have actually created an industrial analytics platform that enables the industrial companies like large manufacturing and energy operations to be able to prepare themselves for the future and become future ready by leveraging their data and use the power of data to automate their operations.
Now, I'm sure industrial manufacturers have plenty of data from their operations. So what are they missing?
So we found a common problem, which really was this industry is not doing much with their data that they generate on a day-to-day basis. When it does, it becomes a cumbersome project where you bring in toolkits, consultants, and get into this project which never ends in time. You keep on pouring money at it, and it's not scalable.
Were they just collecting data for the sake of collecting data, or do they not realize that they're not capitalizing on this data?
So these industrial companies, this is not the first time they were collecting data. They've been collecting data for lots of purposes, and one of the bigger purposes is for diagnostics purposes. So when you look at any operations, you're always looking at the data to understand what happened, but it's always what happened after, not what's going to happen. So we're kind of going in and helping them understand it's not always that you have to wait for after the fact. There's an ability for you to control your production line, control this process, control your assets, control how much energy you're utilizing.
Is there an example you could share? And you don't have to name names or anything, but just something a little bit more concrete to help explain what your product does.
So we've worked in a few different areas, and I'll speak to a couple that are easily relatable. So when we go in and work in the food and ag industry, two of their largest costs are their raw materials that they use and energy. So we have actually helped on both sides. Energy one is easy to understand because they're using some assets to generate energy. These are different assets. These are turbines that they actually use for generation of power and steam that's used as a source of energy within the plant. Usually, you actually have set parameters, and you know that I'm always going to run these turbines at this 100% level. No matter what is my demand, I just don't understand. So I'm always going to run them at a certain level. When we go in and we see that their biggest challenge is the cost of the energy side, then We actually implemented the models, the platform that read the demand of the plant on a regular basis and understands on an ongoing basis what the demand of the plant is. And it actually takes all of the parameters from the turbines to understand what the running capacity is. And then it actually predicts and says, run this at 70%, run this, then the second turbine at X%, and run the third asset at Y%, so that you don't always have to run them at the same level and consume the higher level of fuel for actually running these assets. So that way, what's happened is now the models are running like you would say anybody who's actually sitting there and understanding the overall environment of how to run the energy without actually having 10 engineers who would be sitting there and doing it. The models actually understand the demand, predict how to run these turbines, and not just that, actually the function is further carried back through these models by a fully closed loop system, so that you don't have to have a human who have to go in and turn off knobs all the time, because it's continuously running. So that's why it's a fully closed loop process. So we understand the demand, predict how to run these turbines, and control as well in terms of the changes that need to be made at the control systems level as well. What that means is really now, because these generation assets are running more efficiently, less consumption of fuel, because you know that you don't always have to run them at the highest of the capacity, so less consumption of fuel. And then these assets on its own, the remaining useful life increases because you're not always running them at the maximum capacity. And overall, I think one of the other benefits that they gained was also reducing the carbon emission, because you're not always consuming that much fuel. And another case is really, how do we produce better quality of our output? So another example, actually the closest to relate to, would be, again, food. So one of the largest pasta manufacturer today uses it in its pasta production line. So the platform is implemented where the models actually understand all the parameters of how the production process is running. And the end goal is, how do we actually help to increase the shelf life of the pasta? Because if certain parameters can be controlled, be it, certain levels of temperature and other things that can be controlled during the process, then you can actually have a higher grade of product, which means that you can increase the shelf life of that product. So we're actually working on the pasta side, and we're predicting and the quality of the pasta that they're producing. And through that process, they're able to control and optimize the quality of the output, as well as increase the shelf life of the pasta.
Walk us through the process of taking this data, which historically has been for diagnostic purposes only, and how it can be repurposed to improve processes.
So there are 3 layers to the platform. There is a configuration layer where somebody goes out, uploads the data, and says, if I could predict X and Y, then I would actually be able to control all my production. So what we allow them to do is, through the configuration layer, is configure your process and apply the data to the process through the configuration layer. So that's the first thing. They configure a use case and say, I'm looking to predict temperature. I'm looking to predict this output. I'm looking to predict this spec. From there, they would actually upload all the data. And then they would say, this is a case of forecasting X field, or this is a case of predictive failure. So they would actually pick that option from the drop-down menu. The second part that happens, which is the data analysis part, it's actually through the AI pipelines that we have built. So after the configuration, the AI pipelines, you actually go out and pick from the menu of pipelines. And then they sit back and they let the platform do its work, where then looking at the data, the processing of the data happens, and then the platform basically then shows them a set of models as a result, to tell them what are the most relevant models that pertain to what they were looking to do. And then they can actually see the performance and the accuracy of those models. If then they can actually go in and see how each of the parameter that they had inputted impacts what they're looking to understand. And after understanding and look at all of the coefficients from there, they can actually click and they can launch that in real time. So it goes into full production mode from there. So that's how it's been built. It's been built so that anybody who can understand their process can configure, pick what they're looking to analyze, and then from there, rapidly deploy it in real time with their dynamic flowing data as well.
So I would go in and say, I want to extend the shelf life of pasta. I would give it the parameters and it would return those elements that would have the greatest impact on shelf life. And then I can take those insights and implement them into the production process.
Yes, so that's what we do. Then they would actually give us access into some sort of wherever the data is coming from. So in real time, then you can actually plug it in. We've actually built all of the protocols in where it can integrate into any of their operational systems, any historians, anywhere where they're actually collecting that data or we're acquiring that data from. But to correct on that, on the first one, they don't even have to understand what parameter impacts the most. All they need to actually configure is what are they looking to predict. Once they go in and see the results, within the results, they also get the ability to be able to drill down and see how each of the parameters impacts the output that they're looking to measure. So it doesn't have to be necessarily they need to understand it. All they need to actually configure through it, this is the data, this is what I'm looking to predict. And then once the analysis spits out results for them, they can see how each of the other parameters impacts what they were looking to predict. So that allows them to create controls around it. So they can say, oh, well, in this case, the angle of the shoot where my content was coming from, raw material, that impacts it by like 40%. I didn't even know that. I've seen people see that sometimes and go, oh, I didn't even know that. It actually allows them to understand better the correlations as well of each of their parameters.
Got it. So I don't have to guess what might impact the process. I just give it a dump of data and the platform figures it out for me. What happens though if the data changes?
So the AI part is implemented so it continuously learns from the changing because the data is never the same. But if you're adding new sensors, you're adding new parameters or things, then somebody would actually go in and make sure that data is captured also in the platform. But we have got a fairly automated system that can work in these very, very dynamic environments and continuously learns from it. The other side, from implementing a full closed loop, that's really where they would give us the access back, and then we would actually create a complete closed loop system back into whatever control system they have to make the change.
Humera, if somebody's interested in your company and the platform, what's the best way to learn more?
Obviously, the first thing is, through the website, being able to actually connect with us. One of our key values is our responsiveness and the agility, not just in the product, but in our culture as well. So absolutely be happy to share more.
As everyone listening continues to do their part in flooding the world with the data, think about how you can use that data. What story does the data tell? Can a narrative tell that story better than a dashboard? And do people really even need to actively interpret the data? Or in some industries, can we just let AI tweak the processes? I want to thank Marc Zionts and Humera Malik for sharing their insights, and we'll see you on the next episode.
This has been Inside Forbes Councils. Please be sure to subscribe to us on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you're a member of the Forbes Councils and would like to participate in our podcast series, please email your member concierge. If you're interested in joining a Forbes Council, learn more at forbescouncils.com.